billionaire survives an accident and loses his memory, or so everyone believes. His fiancée takes control of the house. His children grow silent, and only the maid seems to notice their fear. But what if the billionaire isn't as broken as they think? What if every word, every rule, and every cruel moment is being recorded? Stay till the end to see how one hidden truth turns this silent house upside down. Hello friends, welcome to our story. Before we begin, please like this video and subscribe to the channel. And tell me one thing, where are you watching this video right now, and what time is it in your city? We love to know that. The doctors said the word slowly, carefully, as if the syllables themselves could bruise him. Amnesia. Richard Whitmore lay still in the private recovery suite, staring at the ceiling lights as they blurred into one another. The room smelled of antiseptic and expensive wood polish. Machines hummed softly beside him. Outside the glass wall, Los Angeles glowed, untouched, indifferent. 2 weeks ago, he had nearly died. The official story was simple. Exhaustion, stress, a minor accident at the estate gym. A fall. A blow to the head. Nothing criminal. Nothing suspicious. But what followed wasn't simple at all. You may experience memory gaps, the neurologist continued. Short-term confusion. Emotional disconnection. It could resolve in weeks, or it could take longer. Victoria stood at the foot of the bed, arms folded tightly across her chest. She wore black, elegant, fitted, controlled. Not morning black, strategic black. "Does he recognize me?" she asked. Her voice didn't shake. The doctor glanced at Richard. "Mr. Whitmore, do you know who this is?" Richard turned his head slowly. He looked at Victoria as if she were a painting on a wall. Familiar shapes, no attachment. He swallowed. "No," he said. Victoria's breath caught, just for a fraction of a second. Then she pressed a hand to her lips, eyes widening in what looked like shock. "Oh my God," she whispered. "Richard, it's me." Her fingers brushed his arm. He didn't flinch, didn't respond. Inside, something else stirred, because Richard remembered everything. He remembered the way Emily had stopped running into his arms months ago, the way Liam cried whenever Victoria entered the room, the sentence his daughter had whispered once, late at night, thinking he was asleep. "Daddy, when you're not here, we're not allowed to be kids." He remembered the look on Victoria's face when the doctors turned away. Not fear, relief. So when the neurologist stepped out, and Victoria leaned closer, lowering her voice, Richard made his decision. He would forget. At least that's what he would let them believe. The estate felt different now. Richard was home, but not really. Victoria took control immediately. She handled calls, meetings, finances. She spoke for him, corrected people when they tried to speak to him directly. Richard needs quiet. Richard doesn't remember details. Richard gets overwhelmed. He let her. Emily watched from the staircase, her small fingers curled tightly around the railing. She was 6, too young to understand what had happened, old enough to feel something had gone wrong. Liam, barely 3, clutched his stuffed dog and hid behind Sophia's legs. Sophia. She'd been hired just a month before the accident. Quiet, observant, the kind of presence that didn't announce itself. Victoria barely noticed her, except when she needed something done. "Make sure the children don't upset him," Victoria instructed sharply on the first morning home. "They need to learn boundaries." Emily nodded quickly. "Yes, Mrs. Whitmore." The title landed like a bruise. Richard noticed everything. The way Emily stopped calling him Daddy in front of Victoria. The way Liam was lifted and moved like an object, not a child. The way Sophia lingered near the children longer than necessary. Small hands offering comfort where words were unsafe. That first week, Richard said very little. He let silence do the work. Victoria filled it easily. "Doctors say emotional stability is crucial," she told guests. "Children thrive on discipline, especially after trauma." She said trauma like it was a design flaw. At night, when the house went quiet, Richard lay awake replaying moments from before the accident, things he had dismissed, explained away, trusted someone else to handle. His first wife, Emily and Liam's mother. 2 years ago, a helicopter crash over the Pacific. Mechanical failure. No survivors. Grief had hollowed him out. Victoria had arrived 6 months later, composed, attentive, soothing. She knew when to speak and when to stay silent. She told him the children needed a woman's structure. He believed her. Now, pretending not to remember, he watched her carefully. And Victoria, believing she was unseen, changed. "Emily," she said one morning at breakfast, her tone sweet but edged. "What do we say before sitting?" Emily froze, eyes darting to Sophia, then back to Victoria. "May I sit down, Mrs. Whitmore?" Victoria smiled. "Good. You're learning." Liam reached for the cereal box. Victoria's hand snapped out, slapping it closed. "No," she said calmly. "You eat what you're given." He whimpered. Sophia took a step forward. "I can prepare something else for him." Victoria turned slowly. "Did I ask?" Sophia stopped, lowered her eyes. "No, ma'am." Richard watched from his chair, hands resting uselessly in his lap. His jaw tightened. Later, when Victoria left the room, Sophia slid a banana into Liam's hand. Whispered, "Quickly." The boy smiled at her like she'd given him the world. Richard memorized that smile. That afternoon, Victoria took a call in the study. Her voice carried. "They don't need affection," she said. "They need order. Especially now, while he's fragile." A pause. "Yes, it's easier this way." Richard stared at the wall, heart pounding. That night, he did something he hadn't done in years. He listened. 2 days later, Victoria stood at the foot of the bed again, arms crossed. "You don't remember anything?" she asked. Richard shook his head slowly. "Some things feel familiar, but empty." She studied him, searching. Then she smiled. "That's okay. I'll help you." But her eyes said something else. Control. As she turned to leave, Richard closed his eyes. Not because he was tired, because if he didn't, he might reveal himself too soon. And the truth, he knew now, was darker than he'd imagined. By the second week, the house had learned Victoria's rhythm. Mornings were quiet, too quiet. No cartoons, no running, no laughter echoing through the marble halls that Richard had once designed to feel warm, alive. Now silence was currency. Silence meant approval. Emily learned this first. She woke before sunrise, carefully smoothing her bedspread the way Victoria liked. No wrinkles, corners sharp. She folded her pajamas and placed them under the pillow, just as she'd been taught. Liam wasn't so quick to learn. He still woke crying sometimes, still reached out when he wanted comfort, still forgot rules that changed every day. Victoria hated that. "Children should adapt," she said once at breakfast, sipping her coffee. "Especially boys. Weakness becomes habit." Richard sat at the table, staring down at his untouched plate. He forced his face into a mask of confusion, of distance. Inside, his chest burned. Sophia stood near the counter, pretending to wipe a surface already clean. Her eyes flicked constantly to the children. Emily ate slowly, counting her bites. Liam pushed his spoon around, distracted. "Sit properly," Victoria said without looking. Liam slipped off the chair slightly. The sound of the chair scraping the floor was enough. Victoria's head snapped up. "Do you think this is a playground?" Liam's lip trembled. He looked instinctively toward Richard. Victoria noticed. Her smile was thin. "He doesn't remember you like before. Don't confuse him." The words landed harder than any slap. Emily reached for her brother's hand under the table, squeezing it gently. Sophia saw it. Victoria didn't, or pretended not to. Later that morning, Richard wandered the halls, unsteady on purpose. Victoria followed closely, correcting his steps, guiding him like a child. "Your office is off limits for now," she said. "Too many distractions." Richard nodded. He passed Emily's room. The door was open. Inside, the walls were bare. The drawings gone. The stuffed animals gone. Only the bed, the desk, the wardrobe. "Minimalism helps focus," Victoria said. appearing behind him. Children get attached to nonsense. Richard turned to her slowly. Emily likes to draw. Victoria shrugged. She'll grow out of it. He said nothing. But that night, when Sophia brought Emily to bed, she found the girl sitting silently on the mattress, hands folded in her lap. Where's Bunny? Emily asked softly. Sophia hesitated. Which bunny? The one Mommy gave me, Emily said. The pink one. Sophia's throat tightened. She'd seen it earlier, discarded in the trash. She's being cleaned, Sophia lied gently. I'll bring it back soon. Emily nodded, accepting the answer because she'd learned not to ask again. From the hallway, Richard listened. His fingernails dug into his palm. Victoria's control sharpened as days passed. Meals became smaller, schedules stricter, smiles rarer. Every mistake was noted. Why is this cup here? Why are your shoes not aligned? Why are you breathing so loudly? Emily absorbed it like rain, quietly, constantly. Liam resisted. He cried. He forgot. He reached for things he wasn't allowed to touch. Each time, Sophia intervened just enough to soften the damage. A hug when no one was looking. A snack hidden in her apron. A whispered story at night through the crack in the door. Richard noticed the way Sophia positioned herself between Victoria and the children whenever possible. Subtle, strategic, brave. One afternoon, Richard sat in the living room while Victoria hosted a video call with friends. They've changed so much, Victoria said proudly, angling the camera toward Emily. So obedient now. Emily stood stiffly, hands clasped. Aren't you going to say hello? Victoria prompted. Emily swallowed. Hello. Louder. Hello. Smile. Emily smiled. It didn't reach her eyes. Richard felt something inside him crack. After the call ended, Victoria turned to Sophia. Take them upstairs. Quietly. Yes, ma'am. As Sophia led the children away, she glanced back at Richard. Their eyes met. In that look, he saw it. She knew. She knew he was watching. She knew something was wrong. That night, Richard pretended to sleep early. Victoria stayed up late, pacing the bedroom while speaking on the phone. They're manageable, she said. Fear is effective. Much better than affection. Richard held his breath. Yes, especially now that he's diminished. Her laugh was soft, satisfied. When she finally slept, Richard slipped quietly out of bed. He went to the hallway outside the children's rooms. Emily's door was slightly open. Inside, Sophia sat on the floor beside the bed, whispering. You're safe right now, she murmured. I'm here. Emily nodded, eyes wide. Will Daddy remember us again? Sophia didn't know he was listening. I think he never forgot, she said carefully. Sometimes grown-ups just need time to fix things. Richard leaned against the wall, eyes burning. Liam stirred in his crib, whimpering. Sophia rose instantly, lifting him into her arms. It's okay, she whispered. I've got you. She stayed until his breathing slowed. Richard turned away before she could see him. The next morning, Victoria announced new rules. No more wandering, she said at breakfast. Emily, you'll stay in your room unless I say otherwise. Liam will be supervised at all times. Sophia stiffened. Ma'am, that may be difficult. Victoria's gaze was sharp. Is there a problem? No, Sophia said quietly. Richard watched Victoria's satisfaction grow. Isolation. That was the goal. Later, when Victoria left for a charity meeting, Richard followed Sophia into the kitchen. Children seem different, he said slowly, choosing his words like stepping stones. Quieter. Sophia froze. Yes, she said after a moment. They are. Is that normal? She looked at him, really looked at him, at his eyes, at the question beneath the question. No, she said softly. It isn't. Something unspoken passed between them. Trust. That evening, Richard made another decision. If Victoria believed he was broken, if she believed he was harmless, then she would continue to show her true face. And he would let her. For now. By the third week, Victoria no longer bothered to hide. Not from the staff. Not from the children. And certainly not from Richard. In her mind, he was already gone. Just a body occupying space. A name on documents she managed. A man whose authority had dissolved the moment his memory failed. That made her careless. Dangerously so. It started with small things. Comments said aloud instead of whispered. Orders delivered with no attempt at kindness. Emily, fix your posture. You look sloppy. Liam, stop whining. No one likes noisy children. Sophia, if you're going to stand there, make yourself useful. Richard sat nearby during these moments, eyes unfocused, hands folded, playing the role perfectly, listening, watching, remembering. One afternoon, he was seated in the sunroom when Victoria entered, phone pressed to her ear. Yes, I know, she said, pacing. It's easier now. He doesn't question anything. She stopped in front of him, glanced down, and continued without lowering her voice. The children? Manageable. Fear works better than love. Love makes them demanding. Richard felt his pulse spike, but his face stayed blank. I'm restructuring everything, Victoria went on. Once things are finalized, I won't need to pretend anymore. She laughed softly and walked away. Richard didn't move for a full minute. Fear works better than love. The words repeated in his head like poison. Emily's world had shrunk to a single floor. Her bedroom, the hallway, the bathroom, no garden, no playroom, no freedom. Every day, Victoria inspected her room with the precision of a drill sergeant. Wrinkles, she said once, pulling the sheet loose. Do it again. Emily's hands trembled as she remade the bed. Again. Sophia stood in the doorway, silent, jaw tight. Liam cried more now. Loud, panicked cries that echoed through the halls. Victoria hated the sound. Take him away, she snapped one morning. I can't think. Sophia carried him out, whispering comfort. When she passed Richard, their eyes met briefly. He saw exhaustion there, fear, but also resolve. That night, Richard couldn't sleep. Victoria lay beside him, scrolling through her phone, unconcerned. He turned his head slowly. I feel strange, he said. She glanced at him, irritated. That's normal. I hear things, he continued. Voices. Yelling. Victoria exhaled sharply. You're confused. Are the children unhappy? She froze for half a second. Then she smiled. Children don't know what they want, she said coolly. They need to be shaped. Something in her tone made his stomach turn. He nodded, pretending to accept it. Inside, he was done pretending not to understand. The next day, he began preparing. Carefully, quietly, he found the small digital recorder hidden in the back of his desk drawer, the one he used years ago for meetings. He slipped it into his jacket pocket. He didn't turn it on yet. He waited. The opportunity came sooner than expected. It was late afternoon. Rain tapped softly against the windows. Sophia was in the kitchen, chopping vegetables for dinner. Emily stood nearby, drawing on a scrap of paper with a dull pencil. Victoria entered, heels sharp against the floor. What is this? She demanded. Emily flinched. It's a picture. Of what? Emily hesitated. My mommy. The air changed. Victoria laughed, short, cold. That woman is gone. Emily's eyes filled. She used to read to me. Victoria snatched the paper and tore it in half. Stop clinging to the past, she said. You have me now. Emily's shoulders shook silently. Sophia stepped forward. Ma'am. Victoria turned on her. Enough. She tossed the torn drawing into the trash. Richard stood in the doorway. He pressed the button. That evening, he listened in his room as the recorder replayed the sound of paper tearing. Emily's quiet sobs. Victoria's voice. Clear, controlled, merciless. Something in him hardened. He wasn't just collecting evidence anymore. He was counting down. The next incident was worse. Breakfast. Victoria served herself pancakes, syrup glistening. Emily received one small piece. Liam's plate had half a slice of toast. Can I have more? Emily asked softly. Victoria slammed her fork down. Do you want to be ugly? Is that what you want? Emily shook her head violently. Sophia tried to intervene. She's still hungry. Victoria's hand struck the table. You are not her mother. Richard pressed the recorder deeper into his pocket. That night, Sophia found him in the hallway. You shouldn't hear this, she said quietly. It isn't good for you. He looked at her. Really looked at her. They're afraid, he said simply. Sophia's eyes glistened. Yes. For how long? She swallowed. Longer than they should be. He nodded slowly. Then he did something unexpected. I trust you, he said. Sophia froze. You shouldn't, she replied carefully. But I do. She searched his face, as if looking for cracks in the act. She didn't find any. All right, she said softly. Then listen carefully. She leaned closer. She plans to send Emily away. A boarding school. Strict. Isolated. Richard's blood went cold. When? Soon, Sophia whispered. She says it'll be easier without witnesses. That night, Richard lay awake staring at the ceiling. Victoria slept peacefully beside him. He whispered into the darkness. Unheard. Not one more day. The house felt like it was holding its breath. Richard woke before dawn, long before Victoria stirred. He lay still, staring at the ceiling, listening to the faint sounds of the estate coming alive. The hum of distant traffic, the soft click of the irrigation system outside, the quiet footsteps of Sophia starting her day. Every sound felt sharper now, because Sophia's warning echoed in his head. She plans to send Emily away. Boarding school. Isolation. No witnesses. Victoria wasn't just controlling the children anymore. She was erasing them, piece by piece, until they were small enough to manage, quiet enough to display, broken enough not to fight back. Richard rose carefully from the bed and dressed. He slipped the recorder into his pocket again. Not as a precaution this time, as a weapon. Breakfast was served at exactly 8. Victoria insisted on precision, on routine, on control disguised as order. Emily arrived first, already dressed, hair pulled back tightly. She took her seat without being told. Liam was slower, sleepy, confused. When he dropped his spoon, the sound echoed too loudly. Victoria's eyes narrowed. I told you, she said coldly. We don't make messes. Liam's chin trembled. He bent down to retrieve it, his small fingers clumsy. Sophia moved instinctively to help. Don't, Victoria snapped. He needs to learn. Richard watched his son struggle, his hands shaking. He felt something snap inside him. Maybe I can help, he said, his voice hesitant by design. Victoria looked at him sharply. No, you'll upset him. The lie was almost funny. Almost. Later that morning, Victoria made an announcement. I'm hosting a lunch tomorrow, she said casually. Some friends. People who matter. Emily stiffened. And you, Victoria continued, pointing at her, will behave. No mistakes. No tears. Yes, Mrs. Whitmore, Emily whispered. Sophia glanced at Richard, fear flashing across her face. They both understood. Tomorrow was a performance, and Emily was the centerpiece. That afternoon, Richard followed Sophia into the garden. The hedges were tall enough to shield them from the windows. For the first time, they stood close, no walls, no pretending. She's planning something, Sophia said quietly. I know. She wants the children perfect, Sophia went on. Quiet, empty, so no one asks questions. Richard closed his eyes briefly. She won't get that chance. Sophia studied him. You sound certain. He opened his eyes, met her gaze. I remember everything, he said. Sophia inhaled sharply. Her hand flew to her mouth. You? Yes. Silence stretched between them, heavy and electric. She thinks I don't, he added. That's why she keeps talking. Sophia's hands trembled. Why didn't you stop her sooner? The question wasn't accusation. It was pain. Because I needed proof, he said. And because the moment I reveal myself, it has to end. Completely. Sophia nodded slowly. Then tomorrow, she said. Yes. That night, Victoria rehearsed. She coached Emily like a performer. Stand straight. Smile when spoken to. Do not speak unless spoken to. Emily nodded to every command. When Victoria left the room, Emily collapsed onto the bed, shoulders shaking. Sophia sat beside her, pulling her into a gentle embrace. You're doing so well, she whispered. Just one more day. Emily looked up. Will Daddy remember me tomorrow? Sophia hesitated. Yes, she said softly. I think he will. From the hallway, Richard pressed his forehead to the wall. Tomorrow. The lunch began at noon. 3 women arrived, elegant, laughing, unaware. The marble floors gleamed. The table was set perfectly. Victoria was radiant. This is important, she murmured to Richard. Try not to embarrass me. He nodded. Emily and Liam were brought in. Emily wore a pale dress that made her look smaller than she was. Liam clung to her hand. Aren't they lovely? Victoria said proudly. They've improved so much. Emily recited her greeting flawlessly. One woman smiled. She's so quiet. Yes, Victoria said. I trained her well. The word trained hung in the air. Then it happened. Liam reached for a glass of water. His hand slipped. The glass shattered. The room went silent. Victoria's face changed instantly. You stupid. She raised her hand. Sophia stepped forward without thinking. Stop. The slap landed on Sophia's cheek. Hard. Emily screamed. Richard stood up. That's enough. The room froze. Victoria turned, furious. Sit down. You don't understand. I understand everything, Richard said calmly. He reached up and removed the recorder from his pocket. And so will everyone else. Victoria's face drained of color. What is that? She demanded. Richard pressed play. Her voice filled the room. Fear works better than love. The guests stared in horror. Richard took a step toward his children. I remember, he said. And it ends now. For a moment no one moved. The shattered glass lay scattered across the marble floor like frozen sparks. The 3 guests stood stiffly around the table, their smiles erased, their hands hovering awkwardly at their sides. Victoria was the first to speak. You don't know what you're doing, she said sharply, her voice rising. Turn that off right now. Richard didn't look at her. He knelt in front of Emily and Liam instead. Emily was shaking. Her small hands were clenched into fists, her eyes darting between Richard and Victoria as if she were waiting for permission to breathe. It's okay, Richard said softly. You didn't do anything wrong. Emily's lips trembled. Daddy? The word broke something open. Richard pulled her into his arms. She clung to him instantly, sobbing into his shoulder like she'd been holding her breath for months. Liam followed, pressing himself against Richard's chest, his tiny fingers digging into the fabric of his shirt. Victoria's voice cut through the moment. You're confusing them. Richard looked up slowly. No, he said. I'm freeing them. One of the guests took a step back. Victoria? Is this true? Victoria's composure cracked. This is a misunderstanding. He's sick. He doesn't even remember. I remember everything, Richard said. He stood, still holding Liam, Emily wrapped tightly around his leg. You spoke freely because you thought I was broken, he continued. You said fear was better than love. You said children needed control. He held up the recorder again. And you said it often. The room felt smaller, heavier. Sophia stood near the doorway, one hand pressed to her reddened cheek, eyes wide with shock and relief. Richard turned to her. I'm sorry, he said quietly, for putting you in this position. Sophia shook her head. I'd do it again. Victoria laughed suddenly, sharp, unhinged. Oh, please, don't turn her into a hero. She's been manipulating you this whole time. Richard's eyes hardened. The only manipulation happened under my roof, to my children. Victoria stepped closer, lowering her voice. You need me, she hissed. You can't handle this alone. You were falling apart after your wife died. I held this family together. Richard's jaw tightened. My wife died 2 years ago in a helicopter crash, he said evenly. And somehow my children were still smiling, still laughing. He gestured toward Emily. They stopped smiling after you arrived. The guests exchanged glances. One whispered, "We should leave." "No," Richard said calmly. "You were invited here to see perfection. Now you'll see truth." Victoria's eyes flashed with panic. "You can't do this to me." "I can," Richard replied. "And I am." Victoria lunged for the recorder. Richard stepped back. Sophia moved instinctively between them. "Don't," Sophia said firmly. Victoria's hand struck the air inches from her face. "Touch her again," Richard said quietly, dangerously, "and you'll learn how much I remember." For the first time, Victoria looked afraid. "You think you've won?" she spat. "You think this ends well for you?" Richard didn't raise his voice. "It ends with you leaving. That's not your decision." "It is," he said. "This house is mine. These children are mine. And you are done." He turned to the guests. "If any of you are willing to testify to what you witnessed today, my lawyer will contact you." One woman nodded slowly, shaken. "I will." Victoria's face drained of color. "You'll regret this," she said, backing toward the door. "I'll ruin you." Richard didn't flinch. "You already tried." She grabbed her bag, her heels striking the floor in sharp, angry bursts as she stormed out. The sound faded down the hall. Silence followed. Real silence. Not the fearful kind. Emily lifted her head. "She's gone." "Yes," Richard said softly. "She's gone." Sophia crouched beside them, brushing Emily's hair back gently. "You're safe now." Liam reached for Sophia's sleeve. She smiled through tears. Richard watched the interaction, his throat tight. "You protected them," he said to Sophia. "Every day." She shook her head. "I did what anyone should." "No," he said. "You did what I couldn't while I was pretending." Her eyes met his. There was no anger there, just honesty. "You should forgive yourself," she said quietly. "You were trying to make sure they never suffered again." Richard looked down at his children, curled against him, finally calm. "I will," he said. "But first, I'll make sure they never suffer like that again." That night, after the guests were gone and the house was quiet, Richard sat with Emily and Liam on the couch. Emily leaned against his chest, sleepy but peaceful. "Daddy?" she murmured. "Will you forget again?" He held her tighter. "Never." Sophia stood nearby, unsure where she belonged now. Richard looked up at her. "Please stay," he said. "At least for tonight." She nodded. "I will." For the first time in weeks, the house felt warm. Not perfect, but safe. Morning light filtered through the tall windows, soft and golden, touching corners of the house that had been dark for far too long. Richard woke on the couch, his arms stiff from not moving. Emily was curled against his chest, her breathing slow and even. Liam lay sprawled across his other arm, one tiny foot resting against Richard's ribs like an anchor. For the first time since the accident, Richard hadn't dreamed. He carefully shifted, easing himself upright without waking them. Sophia stood nearby, quietly folding a blanket she'd taken from the guest room. She moved slowly, respectfully, as if the house itself might still be fragile. "You should rest," she said softly. "So should you," Richard replied. She gave a small smile. "I slept better than I expected." Emily stirred. Her eyes opened slowly, unfocused at first. Then they found Richard. "Daddy?" she whispered, uncertain. "I'm here," he said immediately. Her face softened. She sat up, scanning the room. "She's really gone?" "Yes," he said. "She's not coming back." Emily nodded once, absorbing it. She leaned into him again, as if confirming that gravity still worked the way it should. Liam woke moments later, rubbing his eyes. When he saw Richard, he smiled. A wide, unguarded smile Richard hadn't seen in months. That smile nearly broke him. Later that morning, the house began to breathe again. Sophia prepared breakfast, not measured, not restricted. Just food. Plates that were full. Choices offered, not enforced. Emily hesitated before taking a second pancake. "May I?" she started. Richard gently covered her hand with his. "You don't have to ask anymore." She blinked, then slowly reached for it. Liam clapped his hands. Syrup smeared across his fingers. Sophia laughed quietly. The sound was small, but it filled the room. Richard watched them all and felt the weight of the last few weeks settle. Not as pain this time, but as understanding. He'd believed love meant providing safety through structure, through control, through choosing someone he thought would complete the picture. He'd been wrong. The lawyers came later that day. Victoria's name was removed from accounts, access codes, permissions. The process was swift. Richard had already prepared for this moment long before he allowed himself to act. Sophia took the children outside while Richard handled the calls. From the window, he watched Emily run barefoot across the grass. Liam toddling behind her, laughing. That sound alone felt like justice. When he finished, he stepped outside. Emily was showing Sophia the roses. "Daddy planted these," she said proudly. "They're beautiful," Sophia replied. Richard approached quietly. "They were your mother's favorite," he told Emily. Emily looked up at him. "Can we keep them?" He smiled. "Always." That evening, after baths and bedtime stories, Richard sat alone in the living room. The house was quiet again. But this time, the quiet felt earned. Sophia hovered near the doorway. "You don't have to stay," Richard said gently. "I know today was a lot." She shook her head. "I want to." They sat in silence for a moment. "I should apologize," Richard said finally, "for lying to you, for pretending." Sophia nodded. "I was angry, confused. I wouldn't blame you if you didn't trust me," he said. She looked at him then, not as an employer, not as a billionaire, but as a man who had made mistakes and stayed to fix them. "I trust what I saw," she said. "A father who listened, even when it hurt." Richard exhaled slowly. "I don't know what comes next." Sophia smiled faintly. "Neither do I." They didn't need to. Upstairs, Emily slept with her bunny tucked under her arm. Liam snored softly, his stuffed dog clutched tight. Richard stood in the doorway of their room longer than necessary, memorizing the piece. He had pretended to forget in order to remember what mattered. And now, finally, he would not forget again. Outside, the roses swayed gently in the night air, blooming fully at last. The house was no longer perfect. It was honest. And it was home. This story reminds us that danger doesn't always come from strangers. Sometimes it hides behind love, wealth, and silence. A billionaire who chose to watch, a maid who chose to stand up, and children who survived what no one else saw. Now tell me, did Richard do the right thing by pretending to lose his memory? Should Sophia have risked her job for the children? And what would you have done in her place? Share your thoughts in the comments. If stories like this move you, subscribe and stay with us.